Hello and welcome back to the Graphic Library. My name is Matthew. Join me as we undertake our very first review of Batman by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. So I had this book in front of me and I thought, okay, why are we starting with this one? First of all, it's Batman. And that might be the extent of why we're starting with this book, but in thinking about superheroes and comics, there is really no better place to start than Batman. Also, this is a very well-known and renowned story. As I mentioned before, the creative team, Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale, are a dynamic duo. They work super well together and do some amazing work. Yes, I think this sort of lays the groundwork for what we'll be looking at in the graphic library, and is a good example of a good book, and it is Batman. So that's what we'll be starting with today. As I mentioned in the intro video, I will be talking about the content, the writing, and the narrative structure, as well as the characters, the art as well, and accessibility. So who can read it, who should read it, and what do you need to possess in your knowledge of all that is nerdy and geeky to understand this. So yeah, this is what the book looks like, and I'll have a picture come up as well. It's got a really sort of nice, simple spine, as well as the back. And the cover, again, this is an older book, so the hardcover design underneath isn't too flashy or anything, but it is nice and it is simple. It's a bit hard to see, but there will be a picture of that as well. So, Batman by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. What is this book? Okay, so I think Batman is one of those characters which most people know about, and there's been some sort of iteration of Batman, on the screen since 1966, right? So Batman is a very popular character, and I feel like especially in a lot of modern adaptations, I'm thinking about the Christopher Nolan movies as well as the new the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, they draw a lot from one of the particular stories in here, but we'll come to that later. So this book contains 4 separate but connected stories, all written and illustrated by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. The first one is Haunted Night. So I won't spend too long on this. This is sort of like a 3-issue miniseries. They're 3 issues from 3 sequential years in the mid-90s, where Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale were writing Batman, and they're not really linked together at all, except for the fact that they all take place on Halloween, okay? And I feel like, and you'll see this later, but this is very much a lead up to what they wanted to do with the next story. So, yeah, you get these little snapshots of Batman at Halloween. These are great stories. I feel like they're also great testers for this book, as in, you start the book with these, and if you like them, you're probably going to enjoy the rest of the book. They also give you some time to settle into the art style and the narrative. So I think they're really valuable, but they are great on their own, but they do very much they feel like an appetizer to the rest of the book. But wow, that's a yummy appetizer. Sorry. Moving on, we have, and this is sort of the main story and the big story that a lot of the movies take from. This is The Long Halloween, which was a 13-part series, which was released in 1997. The Long Halloween, it's a sort of murder mystery narrative, which is really, 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 I don't know, it's just really intriguing, because you get a lot of people saying about Batman, he's the world's greatest detective, right? And he's bestowed this title. But you don't see that a lot, I want to say, especially in more mainstream popular media versions of Batman. Like in The Dark Knight, you don't see Batman doing much investigating. Even in The Batman, you see it a bit more, but yeah, it's really, I mean, spoilers, but you didn't. It was too late. The city got flooded. Anyway, yeah, so it's just this, you get to see this side of Batman, which is really interesting. Basically the premise is there's a serial killer and this killer only murders people, people who belong to a gang, crime family, and then they murder people on like big holidays like Christmas, like Thanksgiving, like St. Patrick's Day, that sort of thing. And then you have Batman as well as others trying to figure out who's doing this and why. So as I said before, this story is set in the Gotham underworld, with different mafia families and different mafia heads and goons running around. And I think this is a really natural place for Batman to be. Batman works well in the crazy costumes of everything, as well as the gritty underground, which is something you see in the Batman as well. And sorry to be explicit, the Batman takes heavily from this story. Well, not everything is exactly the same, but is heavily based on the Long Halloween. So yeah, you get some really fun and good and genuinely interesting interpretations of the mafia and their interactions with Batman, with the police department, with other families. But I think one weakness of this book, and I think of comics in general, I'm going to say, is when you have these costumed characters running around, heroes, villains, sidekicks, and then you have the people associated with them who aren't in costumes but are like associated well, like Alfred, Commissioner Gordon. It's when you have these plain-faced characters who are just, mafia, but when you have the story revolve around them or knowing who they are, it can get a little bit hard to follow. So yeah, this story throws a bunch of people, a bunch of names at you, different families, different allegiances, and it's sort of overwhelming, and you don't, well, at least I didn't really follow every single thread. And I feel like that's something I've noticed in comics in general. When you have these deep, intricate conspiracies, a lot of them, they work well, but I often get lost in it because it's usually resorting to big speech bubbles, explaining things, or just like heavy narration, or having to remember 30 different people who are only slightly different. I think that is something that I struggled with in this book and in general with comics. One thing that I think it does really well, and this is coming back to what I was saying earlier with the characters who don't have, like, maybe aren't superheroes or villains themselves, but are heavily associated with characters, you get this great trio form of Batman, Harvey Dent, who is the district attorney, and he's not Commissioner Gordon at this point, it's just Detective Gordon, who is a police officer. And you see a little bit of this in The Dark Knight, the Christian Bale Batman movie, directed by Christopher Nolan, and you see these three people. It's sort of less explicit in that movie, but they sort of join forces to save Gotham, right? So that comes from this book. You have these three individuals who each have a vision and a mission for Gotham, and they don't completely align with each other, but they do have Gotham's best interests at heart. So they get together and they join forces to make Gotham a better place. And you have to you watch as it unfolds, the way they compromise or they don't compromise, the sacrifices they have to make and the toll that it's taking on their personal lives. I think it's a really, really great introduction to these three characters, and just the sort of harrowing destruction that they undergo in trying to save this city. I think also you get a good interaction between Batman and Catwoman in this book, and this is very much taken from this was taken from here and put into the Batman. And I think they're almost like scenes or panels from this book which just became scenes in the movie. And I think it is an interesting story. Catwoman has her own sort of subplot going on through these books, and we'll come back to that later. But you get this sense of this person who's not really a villain but isn't a hero either, and what happens if there's somebody with this skill set who just uses it to survive, right? And I think you get some playful interactions between her and Batman, and I think it works really well. The next part of this, so that was all The Long Halloween, that murder mystery. The next part of this book is called Dark Victory, written in 2000, and it is a sequel to The Long Halloween, and it follows the fallout from that. So I'm going to, and I think this will be a general rule for my reviews of these books, there are some things that I will spoil. There are some things I will keep hidden. It just depends on how easy it is to talk about this book or any book without spoiling. I think my aim will always be not to spoil big things, but I think the thing with these books and with the way that information seeps into popular culture, there are a lot of things that are already known. And there are a few examples of that on this shelf. But for example, earlier I was talking about Harvey Dent, the district attorney, and how he's trying to save Gotham with the other two. Harvey Dent is Two-Face. He becomes Two-Face. And that happens at some point during The Long Halloween. I'm not going to say when or how, but yeah, he does become Two-Face. That is, I feel like that's something that most people know. But this is important because Dark Victory sort of looks at Two-Face emerging in the scene of Gotham and his effect on the fallout of The Long Halloween, what effect that's had on him as a person, on his personal life, the things that he sacrificed that he hasn't been recognized for, and just this deep sense of injustice that he feels, and it's him coming back, carrying all of that. And while I said The Long Halloween was heavily involved with these different crime families, that does carry over to Dark Victory, but Dark Victory also deals a lot with the colourful superheroes that we see. Sorry, not superheroes, supervillains. Well, I guess it depends who you ask. If you ask Two-Face, they are heroes. But yeah, you see these colourful supervillains sort of move onto the scene with Two-Face, which I think overall Dark Victory is not as good as Long Halloween, but I think it is nice and good to see these villains get a bit more play. But they were also present in Long Halloween. I think, talking about superheroes previously, you also get the introduction of Robin, the Boy Wonder. You get his sort of the turmoil of his origin story of witnessing his parents die before his eyes, and it's very much a distinct and intentional parallel between what happened to him and what happened to Bruce Wayne when he was a child. And then you see Bruce Wayne take him in and try and adjust to having this boy in the house and wanting to care for him but not knowing how, and then eventually, what's the answer? You slap some tights on him and send him out to knock some criminals around. And he does that, and he's great. Another thing that carries on from The Long Halloween is this relationship between Gordon and Batman especially, but you get Harvey or Two-Face in there a little bit, and you see this trio and the ways that they have evolved or devolved or moved on from their initial alliance. And you get some really nice character moments, but you also see that The Long Halloween has hurt them all in different ways. And it's also shaken a bit their sense of justice, what's right and what's wrong. And I think that's really, really impactful. But again, you do see these glimmers of, nice character moments you get, especially between Batman and Gordon. The fourth and final series in this book is called Catwoman When in Rome. This is it's not really a sequel at all. It's more like a little side story. It follows Catwoman, you guessed it, when she goes to Rome. As I said, in Long Halloween and Dark Victory, she sort of has her own thing going on. This, her own mystery she's trying to solve, maybe to do with her lineage and who her parents are. And this sort of follows her, investigation into that. And I think it takes place during the Long Halloween and Dark Victory, probably in Dark Victory. So this was written in 2004. but takes place at the same time as Dark Victory, I would say. This is it's a pretty interesting story. I think it is. It's 6 issues long. I would say maybe that's a little bit too long. Yeah, and it sort of follows this theme as well of the mystery going on, and there are some murders. So I guess you could say it's a murder mystery. Yeah, it's not as strong as the other books or the other series within this book, but it does really follow along and rounds out the story well. And it is a sort of a fun little side quest, I guess. So yeah, that's the overall narrative of this book. I feel like the micro writing of Jeph Loeb is really good. You get some brilliant character moments, as I've talked about. It's pretty easy to follow from panel to panel and bubble to bubble. Yeah, I think he really excels at this micro writing, which creates really genuine character moments and tense conflict as well. I think the macro writing is a bit grandiose. I think it's this, as I said before, it's this big conspiracy, this big murder mystery, and I feel like, I could just be not reading this very well. I might be revealing a bit too much about my intelligence here. I feel like it doesn't all make sense, but I don't think the macro writing is far from unreadable. It is easy enough to follow, and I think if you're not scrutinizing every detail, you get the gist pretty easily, and I think it is a good read. In terms of the art, this art is phenomenal. Now, it is a bit older, and there's a distinct style to it, but I think once you settle into that style, it can really, you'll reap the benefits from that. And I think that's what the Haunted Night series at the beginning, those 3 stories, are really good for, to settle in to the writing and also the art. So with the art, the faces and the backgrounds can be a bit plain, a bit dopey, I want to say, but you do get some really sharp detail. And it's not bad at all, it's just very stylized in a certain way. But where Tim Sale shines is drawing the heroes and also the villains. So, for example, you have these panels of Batman, who's really dark and intimidating, whose cape seems like it's manifesting a life of its own, it's moving. And the colouring and the shadows used in this book remind me of Batman the Animated Series, where often they would actually, instead of having a white piece of paper and drawing black on it, they would start with a black piece of paper and draw on that. And it sort of sets this standard as a starting point of this dark, gritty, grimy world, this dark city and this dark night. And I think that works really well. But as I was saying, where I think Tim Sale shines is with his villains. And boy, I would just love to find a great print of some of these pages and just stick them on my wall, because I think they're amazing. You have these, especially Batman's villains, you have these like grotesque little gremlins like the Mad Hatter or the Penguin, or you have these elongated messes of bodies like Scarecrow and Joker, or you have these sort of bright colours of Catwoman and Poison Ivy. And I think it all just works really well. And yeah, I think the real highlight of Tim Sale's art throughout this whole book is when these villains explode onto the page. And yeah, it's genuinely amazing. And I think with the addition of Two-Face in Dark Victory, that man's just not right. He's not okay. And, I think the art reflects that, he's rotting. He's had acid thrown in his face, and you can see that. And the psychotic nature of all of these villains is brought from the inside out, and I think it takes real talent to do that, and that's exactly what happens in this book. So yeah, that is my review of Batman by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. In terms of accessibility, I think having a passing to in-depth in terms of pop culture knowledge of Batman is all you really need. This is a self-contained story, so you don't need to know anything in terms of the wider universe. This doesn't take place in continuity. However, if you're reading Haunted Night and The Long Halloween and it's a bit of a slog and you feel like it's taking a toll on your soul to try and get through it, because honestly that's sometimes how it feels with these older books. If that's the case for you, I would say no need to continue on to Dark Victory. While it is good in its own right, it is very much a sequel to the more superior The Long Halloween. However, if you are, someone who is a big fan of Batman, especially the more recent movies, and want to get into comics, this is a great place for you to start. It is a great depiction of Batman. It is out of continuity, so you don't need to read anything before or after it. It is a complete and consolidated story. This is the Batman book that you want to be reading. It's not for everyone, as I said, but I do wholeheartedly recommend this book, or at least trying out a few of those beginning stories. So that is the entirety of my review for Batman by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more, then subscribe. And if you have something you want to say or want to add, then please feel free to leave a comment. But apart from that, until next time, see you later.